welcome to Math 647. Typically, every week I will post a weekly introduction video. Typically, those will be on Monday, but I'm doing it today on Tuesday, or this week I'm doing it on Tuesday. I want to go over a couple of things about the course. One thing that I will point out is there's going to be a weekly rhythm that we'll get into. Same things do, every day. We'll talk about that as we go on. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the course as well as what we're going to be doing this week. So if we look at the course schedule, these are all of the topics. If you look in the modules for Math 647 in the Student Resources modules, there's a link to two books. One is called Introduction to the Foundations of Applied Mathematics. That's going to be our main textbook, and it's going to be supplemented these first couple of weeks with a book called Introduction to Statistical Learning in Python. And that's also in the modules as well. So all of these books are available for free online, like legitimately for free. One of them is through the Texas A&M Library, and one is on the author's webpages. So these are legitimately free books, not sort of pirated books or anything like that. That's one of the reasons that I picked them. These are the various topics that we're going to be going through here. One thing that I want to point out, what are the grades for this class? Well, there's going to be a discussion every week. I'll talk about that in just a moment. There's going to be homework due every Monday at 11:59 p.m. That's 40%, and there's a final project that is also 40%. And I will give you more information about that project this week and next week. And I will give you the actual assignment specification. But there's things that I need to get very specific about it that I just want to finalize before I send it to you. One of the things that this will involve is a presentation to me at the end of this semester. Okay, and there's some interesting things that are going to go on in this project, and we will get to that next week. Okay, you can see on week 4 the project proposal is due, and we have this project checkpoint at week 8. Those are the only two sort of odd weeks that might happen where we kind of get off of the normal rhythm that I will be discussing in a little bit. Anyways, these are the various topics that we're going to be going over. They roughly correspond to chapters at least from here on, roughly correspond to chapters in the Introduction to the Foundations of Applied Mathematics book. Okay, so I'm going to go back here to the modules. Your Canvas page is going to look something like this, and every week is going to have a module like this, and there's going to be several things in the modules. This right here, sections 3.1 and 3.2 of ISLP, that's just telling you what sections these notes are based on. I'm going to click on these notes in just a moment here. That should say part 2. I will fix that at the end of the video. I always find typos when I'm explaining things to something else. Anyways, I'll explain this in a minute here. These are going to be sort of like the lecture notes, but again, I'll click on that and tell you about them in just a moment. I will also make lecture videos as well. So the readings here and these lecture notes and the videos are going to be sort of the main instructional content. So one thing that's interesting about these notes here is that they are essentially all going to be in Google Colab notebooks. Now this is for two reasons. One, we're going to be doing a lot of programming in this class to actually implement some of these models. A lot of math and a lot of programming, or some programming in this class. And so having this sort of the lecture notes in an environment where I can have Python code is going to be very helpful. And I can actually illustrate the regression that we're doing. Instead of saying this is how you would do regression, or this is how you could use Python to do regression, I have it right here in the notebook for you to do on your own. Okay, and the homework for this week and most weeks is going to follow the general outlines of these lecture notebooks here. And so you have a lot of good code example. Now, if you're in a situation where you haven't had any programming before, it's definitely there's going to be a learning curve that you have to deal with. But for a class like this, the typical thing is to sort of the implicit thing is that there's some programming requirements, for example, or there's some programming knowledge. So, for example, if you look at the prereqs for this class, it's like 151, 152, and 308 or something like that. Or it might just say 308 in linear algebra. I forget exactly what it says. But the point is, all of those classes here at Texas A&M have a little bit of programming involved. So if you haven't seen any programming before, you can say in the class, you just might there might be a learning curve. But as you can see, as you go through these lecture notes, there's some math stuff, but then there's also different code cells here, and up above I tell you what's happening in the code cells. So I'm not giving you nothing, in other words. Okay, and then every week there's going to be a homework assignment. Um, you'll come here and you will click here to get the Google Colab notebook. And this is, you'll go through this, just do what the assignment says. And then you'll come over here, download.ipynb, and you will turn that in for your homework. Okay, the discussions. So one of the things that is important about the distance master's program is that this is not a self-paced program. So Oksana and a few other people worked up sort of a list of here's some things that you can do to succeed. One of those documents, one of the things that it says, and then send it out to the distance master's students. One of the things that document says is this is not a self-paced program. Okay, so it's the idea for the distance master's program is not you just do all of your work on Saturday or something like that. Now, there is more flexibility. We don't want to not have flexibility, right? We're not saying you have to be somewhere at a certain time. But consistent with that, what I've done here, if you come to the discussions, so as I mentioned in this discussion is a little bit different than most discussions. So week 1 modeling discussion. This week the discussion is going to be a little bit different from the other weeks. So every discussion there's going to be 2 responses that you give. One response is going to be due, excuse me. One response is going to be due by Wednesday at 11:59. That's your first response. And the second response, which is a response to somebody else, is going to be due by Monday at 11:59. There should be a note here. There should be a due date there that says 11:59. It says it down below. Okay. So the second response is due Monday at 11:59 p.m. And here's a rough grading rubric. So if you come, I can't see where so on the student view, I'm not exactly sure where everything is. One thing that I want to point out here, please read this note on AI and plagiarism. There's essentially, for the discussions, for anything, you should not be using AI at all to help you write. And I've given you sort of a list of things you're definitely not allowed to do. That's not an exhaustive list. Then I have here a good rule of thumb for sort of what you should be allowed to do when using AI or not, or whether or not you should use AI. Please let me know if you have any questions about that. I want us to talk to each other. I don't want us to talk to each other in a way that is mediated through AI, because then I don't think that's something that any of us really want to do. Okay, so this kind of gives an overview of the course. Like I said, the project I'm going to talk about more next week, so just don't worry about that for now. Let's just sort of get this first week out of the way. Going to the modules, like what is happening this week? So this week, now this is like the normal introduction that I would do for this week. So I would say, okay, so for this week, we're going to be looking at the basics of linear regression. This covers basically sections 3.1 and 3.2 of the ISLP textbook. And so if you've seen linear regression before, a lot of this is going to be a review. We're going to have a slightly different perspective maybe than you've seen before. We're really going to focus on a lot of the linear algebraic properties of linear regression, and we're going to see not only if you have a linear model, but what if we have a quadratic model or a cubic model or in general a polynomial model. All of those, even though the model itself is a nonlinear function, it still falls under the umbrella of linear regression because the coefficients in the model, it's linear in the regression process is linear in the coefficients of the model, and we'll see what that happens. We'll see more about what that means as we go through this week. There's a modeling discussion. The modeling discussion this week is just basically an introductory thing and something that I can do to sort of gauge how much people know where we are in the class, what people's interests are, and that sort of thing. One of the things I like about teaching in the distance master's program is that there's people who are, they're in their career, and so they just know so many more things than I do because they're off doing, you guys are off doing different things than I'm doing. And so I really like to have discussions, especially when there's a lot of applications like there's going to be in this class. Everybody has a different little piece of the puzzle, a different little perspective. And when we have discussions about it and discuss these things, and I get involved in the discussions, it can be very nice. Okay, and then there's going to be a homework due. It's going to be a basic linear regression problem. When we do the homeworks, all of the homeworks are going to be in a Google Colab notebook. And I'm going to give you instructions in the homework, but essentially you're going to delete those and just type over them. Read the instructions for the homework. So for example, in this week's homework, the idea is that you are trying to you are given data. You have data for the MPGs, the miles per gallon for cars, and their horsepower, and you want to try to predict the MPG from horsepower, and you're writing a Google Colab notebook to explain that to somebody else. Okay, and so it should not be a thing where it looks like a homework assignment. It should look something like a report you might give to somebody explaining why you think this relationship between MPG and horsepower exists, or whatever it is that we happen to be doing that week. And you'll be doing that for this homework assignment as well. Okay, I think that's all I want to say for right now about introductions to the course. I will be posting, today is Tuesday, I will be posting lecture videos for this material tomorrow.